Greetings, sir and sirettes, and welcome back to From the Depths with me, Lathrix, and of course, welcome back to the sandbox mode in which we're going to be retrofitting the aircraft we stole in the previous video, bringing it to Lathrixian standards, which doesn't necessarily mean making it better, to be perfectly honest, but we're going to mess around with it anyway. So I've been having a quick look. That was a perfectly timed burp. So, like I was trying to say there, without being completely disgusting, I was taking a quick look-see at the craft, and I've noticed a few things I would instantly like to change. The first of which is that we are currently using the aerial AI, which makes complete sense when you first look at it. We are an aircraft, therefore we should be using aerial AI. The problem is this. You see how both the top and bottom thrusters are going off at the same time? Yeah, that's the problem. The general purpose PID on this craft is not playing nicely at all with the aerial AI. In fact, it looks like it's completely fighting it a lot of the time, both for roll and for the pitch controls. Although, it is using the AI, where are you? The AI PID for aerial roll, but even so, I have seen a few weirdnesses when I've been flying this thing around. It definitely works, but weirdly. Now, on top of that, it can't sustain its height. Even in combat mode, it ends up just bouncing along the floor after a very short amount of time, which of course is a pretty big problem. So I think I'm going to do is swap over the aerial AI for the land AI very quickly, and then do a bit of tweaking when it comes to the general purpose PID. Hopefully, this should get this thing working. Interestingly as well, these two were both set to roll, but these two were both set to thruster reverse. I feel like this isn't a bad design by any means, and there isn't really any major problems. It just feels like it's been a bit outdated. Things like this shield, where is it? There's a shield color changer here with no shield attached, and lots of little things like that. I feel like it's just a design which has felt the wrath of time. That's pretty much it. Oh. We also have control blocks here, which by the looks of things are overriding these ones. So when I tried to change that in the campaign, it wasn't actually having an effect. Okay. So here's the problem when you're trying to mess around with someone else's design. You don't understand how they've placed things or why, and sometimes it's very easy to get confused. At no point, though, am I trying to say anything done here is wrong or bad or anything like that. It's just I need to change it so it's on my level of insanity, so I understand how each part is working. Right now, I don't see a purpose for these, but I'm very worried about removing them. But I will anyway, because that's just how I am. Okay, well that was interesting. So the reason why this blade was constantly forcing the craft down, you may have noticed this line changing over and over, and I kind of wish I mentioned it before I just fixed it, is because there were two control blocks here to control this spinner, and they were within range of this spinner, so every time the pitch tried to fix itself, it was changing the direction of this one's spin, since this gets overridden by this, gets overridden by the one over here, which means it was just ramming into the floor over and over. But now, as you can see, we have flight. I'm actually going to spawn that in again, just to see. Spawn you in. Hello. As you can see, this one is going down. And if we go to the middle, we can see the blade's line there, the direction of force, keeps on shifting. It's not in a direct path. And slowly we are going to crash. And the reason is this one here. Range 14, range 17, that definitely reaches the main blade. Then there's these two, which are meant to be controlling the altitude, getting overridden. Then there's the ones up here, which I still don't fully understand the purpose of. Where are you? There they are, those two. But if we remove these, and then change them later to a much shorter range version, there we go. Okay. Now where's the one which I changed earlier? Let's get back to work then. Also, this thing wants to go really, really high at like 300. I think I'm going to change that maybe to something more simple. like 150 or something like that. Now, all of these things I've outlined so far, there could be a reason behind every last one of them, and if just one thing breaks or acts a bit weirdly, it could go a bit weird, as we can see by the fellow in the background there. Wait, is this the one with the aerial AI still? I'm on the wrong one. It's the weird one I wanted to be on. Yep, as you can see, still a lot of stuff to do. Now this is because of me changing the AI. It did have the aerial AI role set up, and that was all set up correctly. And now I've changed that. As you can see, it's a bit less stable, whereas the other one is now doing just fine. Maybe I should stick with the aerial AI. I think the design has proved me wrong. Yeah, I may stick with the aerial instead. I'm just not too familiar with the aerial AI PID, that's the thing. I mean the, what's it called? The role PID for the AI. Yep, you're staying at around about the right altitude now. Don't like the rocking so much, and that's something which the aerial AI will force. I don't know which to go with. And as if by magic, well, by the magic of the PID systems, we have total stability. And we're still going up in altitude. I have made that too strong. That is really weird. Original? Well, original with the block fix? No. Yeah, we need to obviously downgrade this blade, which I increased in strength because I didn't realise it was the blocks, the control blocks messing it up, not the blade itself. Oh no, we're at 30. We should not be at 30. Is this not in range? Something's still overriding this. If the altitude is less than 120, also I should change this to height above sea or ground instead, is less than 120. Go to 30 speed, and with this, if it's greater, go to 5. Oh. That was my fault. Completely my fault, I may add. Because I'm the one who changed that. And then once we hit 120, we should stay nice and stable. Well, there's probably going to be a bit of bounce. Since we're not using an altitude PID, we're using the giant rotor blade in the center. But yeah, that's fine. That's really fine. Lovely. Now all we need to do is set up some control blocks so that the land AI can actually handle the flyer, otherwise it simply won't turn a lot of the time. And hopefully we can avoid being crashed into. Please don't... Oh wait, no, you're way lower than I expected. Then we're absolutely fine. Guess who forgot to reattach the turret? There we go. I did remove that briefly when I was trying to figure out which control blocks are affecting what. Can we still do the turn? Yes, we can. Okay, the main weapon is back online. And are we doing okay for altitude? Yep, I can hear the blade. We've now reached... Whoa, that is creepily stable for a rotor blade altitude. Cool. Okay. Next up, messing with the AI so it can actually use the flyer, and then we change the weapons around a bit since the sides are currently meant to be used in the water. So remove the sides probably completely since I also don't want these repair tentacles. Probably do want a couple, but we're not going to use this as a mothership, we're using it as a gun. Oh, that thing's going to crash right into us. Yeah, we're using it for fire support basically, so we don't want all of this stuff set up. It just increases the cost for no reason. Okay, that should be all of the thrusters now turned on with the land AI. And this one apparently has 0 drive fraction. I assume that's intentional.
Form up and fly with moving out.
Do a turn and... Actually no, do this.
Moving out.
Okay, yep, you've now straightened up and you think you're going the right way, that's fine. So now do a turn. There we go, turning into position, and yet the AI seems to be working just fine. The last thing we need to check is combat AI. So let's just spawn something in, turn it off. Should head towards it and then broadside when it gets closer. Definitely turning towards it at least. What are those shells? Is that flak? No, it can't be flak, that's way too much damage. Maybe high explosive without a fuse? With a fuse? Note self, find the ammo customizer. Go forth, my poor little torpedoes, I believe in you. Well, either way it's working, although I will be definitely changing those shells. Okay, ammo customizer, where are you? Place your bets on what those shells actually were. Oh, hello. Yep, they were high explosive with, again, this is just showing that it's an older design because you could use the high explosive head. Though, actually, there is reason to use that because you can break through the armor then explode, but normally then you'd use a depth fuse. Or whatever it's actually called. What's the size of this gun? I didn't even look at the... Okay, so it's only a 71mm. It's using mostly belt-fed, although I have changed a couple to regular autoloaders. And there is space to add a few more. In fact, I definitely will be adding a few more soon. I may actually change the gun, but it's a decent enough gun, though. Maybe keep it the same, but add a high explosive head. And then an inertial fuse. That's a very slow shell, though. But the damage would be a bit better now, and it will counter shield slightly. Well, that's definitely working against wooden armor, and it is also melting the metal as well. Slowly. It's a very slow melt. Perhaps that's the right thing to do, though. This is a very reliable type of gun, heavily countered by shields, but it's hard to dodge and does a very consistent source of damage. Those missiles really do not want to go towards the target, do they? So I've ended up removing all of the missile sections. The reason is, I think what would be best, both in terms of looks and functionality, is to add a new missile silo to the top with a very specific purpose, to kill enemy flyers. So they will have very agile missiles with not that much fuel and not that much payload, but a lot of tracking, so that they can kill very agile enemies very easily, or at least do enough damage to cause a flyer to become destabilized. I think that would be the best, since we already have the turret at the bottom here, which also has been heavily edited, which I'll show in just a second, which can fire at ground units or anything below it. It's a very reliable gun using the regular kinetic shells. So let's spawn in our usual enemy, the King Cobra. Turn on our weapons, and I'll showcase the difference with the gun. A much faster fire rate. Still not the most deadly gun in the world, but this thing will fire for a very, very long time, so it's going to be consistent damage. Also, this craft is getting cheaper by the moment. And soon, what I'm thinking about doing is removing one of these sections of the armor on the outside, the circle, which is protecting the blades, and replacing it with wood and other colored metal, so it looks like it's been fixed. I really want this to look like a scrapped craft as soon as possible. I feel like I still need to make this gun fire faster if we're using these type of shells. They are just that weak. For reference, our Scorpion tanks use shells of similar size, a little bit smaller, but fire them at about 5 times the rate because of its 4 guns. Yeah. So, a couple of things wrong with what I just said. First of all, it's around about 7 to 8 times more shells per second than the lovely flyer over there, but also the millimeter was way off. For some reason, I thought the guns were firing at 70 or 80 millimeters. No, it's 36. These shells are tiny. These are much larger and thus do much more damage, but are fired much, much slower. And honestly, there's also just less space for this gun in this craft. This one, almost the entire section there, is the weapon. This one, it's only the bottom section of this main core. So what we could do, maybe, is build a gun similar to the Scorpion, but half it, so only 2 firing pieces rather than the 4. But to be fair, there's also a lot more stuff we need to do. First of all, I really want to change the engine on this thing. As you may be able to see in the bottom right, it's a very expensive engine to run. It's a good engine, it's very space efficient, but we just don't need that much power. So instead of space efficient, I'm going to rebuild it as fuel efficient. Or we could go with a steam boiler instead. That would be a lot easier to maintain. Actually, yeah, I think the steam boiler is exactly what we're going to do. We can put the boiler where the engine is, and then we can replace some of these ammo sections, which are very smartly placed, by the way, for some batteries with a similar effect, because if these get detonated, it doesn't do damage to the center. Actually, no, we need those batteries and the engines to actually stay aloft, so no, the batteries will stay back here instead. So here's one of the shields, now I've turned it on. Are there any others? I feel like there should be one in the front with how that's shaped. Well, now, though, it's time to gut this engine, and it is a very large engine indeed. Also, don't need this anymore, since we don't have the missiles being fired, which are these ones. Sorry, engine, you're gone. Which means in a second, we should be plummeting to the ground in a very ungraceful fashion. No. Oh no, there is still some engine. Is there some batteries or something? Yeah, it must have some battery power. I didn't even notice that. Shows how alert I am, really, doesn't it? So here's all the storage. Don't need the fuel if we're going to go with full battery power. That wasn't fuel. That just happened to be a red section of armor. Which I will now leave more bright, because that way we know where I've messed up. Aha, I found the front shield projector. Okay, yes, so there is one at the front and one at the back. I've removed pretty much everything now, except for a little bit of battery, which I apparently am blind to. And now I can rebuild it from scratch. Also, the cost of this thing just went down significantly. And now it's time to put the cost back up. Although I did also remove a lot of the tractor beams and stuff, which was allowing this to be a mothership. Since we're not going to use it for that anymore, all of that is just redundant. So this is for... okay, that's great. Also, I should change the detection system. It has been working so far, but since now we're going to be broadsiding, it means we really want a lot of the detection equipment on the weapon itself, since that's the only thing which really needs to be able to see the enemy. Normally, this craft would be going towards the target, but now that won't be the case all the time, since, as mentioned, it'll just broadside. Oh, heat decoy. Interesting. One in the back, maybe? No, just on the front. Well, I guess that's one way of dealing with missiles. We could add an anti-missile system quite easily, just fire some missile interceptors. That is a much weaker engine than I expected we would need. Let's see, though, when we're moving around. No, that's fine. Okay, I'm happy with that. This is literally the engine. Just this here. It's not even on full yet, either. Okay, well, that's really good. We can add a lot more shielding, I guess, and stuff, and also to make it more efficient, what we can do is add a couple of control blocks here to the back, which will work with the boiler, essentially saying if your if your battery level is above a certain amount, turn off or lower the boiler, that way we're not burning quite as much material per second, or if the battery is too low, turn it back up. Right now, We're only burning 1 material a second. That is really cheap. This is why I love boilers. That are so easy to set up. Even for dum-dums like me, they are a very easy option. So boilers. Set boiler rate to 1 if the battery level... Where are you? There we are. If the battery is below, let's say, 90%. Then the other one, now you could make this a lot more accurate and probably a lot better, but we're just doing this to save time right now because I am running out of time and my back feels like someone's stabbing it, which is painful to say the least. Battery, if we are above, however, 90, then turn the boiler down to 0.1. So that should have happened right now already. Yes, it has. Now it's only burning 0.1 materials. This will cause the boiler to drop pressure over time. As you can see, it's going down. I thought it'd go down a bit slower than that. Maybe 0.1 is a bit too extreme. But in a second, we'll hit 90%, and then it will bounce back up. There we go. And over time, this will just find a middle ground. Like I say, you can make it much more accurate, so it's always staying just on the line of the percentage you want. But right now, I'm just going to be a bit lazy and just set it like that. Even that is better than just leaving it on 1 all the time. Oh, also, what we need to do is this. Now, this will make the whole build so much more efficient, it's ridiculous. And it's shield projectors turn off if there are no enemies in sight. There you are. If the enemy range is above 5,000 or no enemies, we turn off the shields, which means we're no longer draining as much power from the boiler, which means it will just rest on that lower amount because it simply doesn't need to burn the same amount. So actually 0.1. So outside of combat, this thing will be ridiculously cheap. Then the other one, to make sure the shields turn back on, which would be nice. Shield projectors, change to disrupt, to reflect. If enemy range is less than 5,000. Let's make sure that works. Oh no, an enemy has appeared! There we go, shields back on. Lovely. So when it comes to rebuilding one of these sections as if it was damaged and then patched together, should I stick with the original shape or go a bit crazy? So it's been built hastily. It's attached, but it's no longer the perfect circle it's trying to be. I don't really know. I think it'd be a lot of effort to make it look scrappy, but also good. That's the problem. I want it to look intentionally built incorrectly, which normally just ends up making it look like it's been built incorrectly, full stop. But maybe things like that, like perhaps putting this a little bit too far forwards for a start. Put you there, remove you two, add a beam, then add some metal which isn't present on the other side, and of course a slightly different colour there. Or perhaps even a bit of piping there, as if we can see what was inside of it once. I'm sure there'd be... it wouldn't just be a pure slab of metal. Maybe the fuel engine version would look a little bit better than that, honestly. Where are you? Yep, that definitely would. Then maybe do the same somewhere like here, so it's not quite as smooth on the corner. So keeping the overall shape mostly, but then looking like it's been replaced. Then I'll do the same. I think what I'm going to do is remove this little connection point here and here, then just add regular metal bolted on, as if that was also broken off. Testing out the anti-aircraft missiles. Let's see if these will work then. And yes, we are maybe sticking with that. So it's going to be a bit hard to make that blend into the craft, but maybe that's the point. Well, not a great start there. At least some hits, and they did try to come back to hit it, and some of them did. Ow. Just kind of staying still right now. We're not in combat mode, we're just on mode. Okay, that was more promising. Let's pretend that was an actual dodge and not just an explosion of everything, right? Okay, yep, those seem absolutely fine. Those will be the anti-aircraft missiles this craft sports. Once again, using this missile section. I'm kind of glitching out into the metal as well. Spin blocks can be abused this way. So I will try to remove the metal it's currently going through, otherwise I just think that's a bit too cheaty. Since there's both a metal block and that there, it kind of doubles up everything, which is really, really unfair. So I'll go ahead and do that, then I will go ahead and make it look like this is actually part of the craft, or at least sort of welded on. Well, it's definitely starting to look a little bit scrappy, and that really looks like a frame that's been placed on top, doesn't it? Which I utterly adore. Really, really liking that. So yeah, it needs to do a bit more work on the sides to make it look like it was once destroyed. I want to redo this section completely, but at least in terms of functionality, I think this thing should be working now. Oh look, there's an enemy wander. Go fight. Guns are firing, anti-aircraft missiles are firing. I'm really happy with how this is turning out. Lovely. And let's make the shields invisible as well. It was good whilst I was messing around with them to actually see them, but right now there is very little need. So, what do we actually need to do to this craft, though? What's necessary? I think more heavily armoring the core would be good. Then I think... honestly, that's about it, really. Just more heavy armor, perhaps a couple more shields, maybe on the sides, even if it's just over here. And then that's pretty much it. I think this is going to be a really dangerous craft. Before we go, the aircraft, which definitely needs a new name and isn't quite done yet, at least in terms of looks, versus the old faithful Pharaoh tank. Now, realistically, I think the tank will win this. It's good against heavy armor, it should be able to shred the mainframe section quite easily, and I will be honest, the flyer is more set up to deal with medium to light enemies, not something which is armor stacked like the Pharaoh. But I think it should be a good fight anyway, so I'll pause time. I am not in either of the vehicles. I'm, in fact, just underneath the flyer. And... begin. Oh, the Hesh actually being deflected by the shield a few times, but not every time. A lot of internal damage already done. However... oh. Not what I expected, gotta be honest. Oh, why are you sinking? Well, I just found out a problem. I kind of forgot that I just added these really heavy-duty missile section to the top. Yeah, I need to readjust the propellers before this thing crashes. So it won, but it would have died... oh no! It lost a little bit of its power. No, it was definitely because of the blades. Okay, let's try that again, this time with the blades working. Oh, okay, so I haven't actually added any more propellers or anything. It turns out what had actually happened was that the propellers were destroyed when fighting against the tank. It lost a huge section, I think, from this area, which then caused it to slowly descend. So actually it was the tank's doing that caused the descent. I will be trying that fight again, though. I can't believe it actually managed to destroy the weapon. I think all the missiles must have hit just the right place. Considering how rare it is for the Pharaoh tank to lose its weapon in all the tests we've done, I'm really happy with that. After a little while longer, the flyer was defeated this time. Still very close, though, and I think that Pharaoh tank... oh, yeah, I keep forgetting this. That Pharaoh tank is the old version, which had 5 repair bots rather than just 1, because I found it a bit unfair. So, without the healing, would it have been different? I don't know. At the moment, it's 1-1, but I do think the aircraft, honestly, it just came out way better than I expected. Although, I don't think it has any repair bots at all, so I will change that. Not so much for in combat, just because it allows me to heal this thing when it's outside of combat, so I can actually do this. Heal. There we go. Clearly, the weakness of this craft is its single rotor blade. Back when it had the aerial AI, it could potentially fly like a thruster craft by using the under thrusters and, of course, the regular forward thrust, because that's essentially what it was. It was a giant thruster craft with an aid with the rotor blade. Right now, the rotor blade is no longer aiding flight, it is all of the flight, so if it gets damaged, it will crash slowly. And unlike some of our other flyers, this thing will be in the middle of the battle. It isn't going to back off constantly, which would be an easier option, but we already have too many craft which do that, so I think that would be really, really boring. We're already reusing weapons. I don't particularly want to reuse modes of transport as well. Also, I really should add some armor to this section. Yeah, the spin blockers are completely exposed. I'll do that in just a second. So to fix this, we have two options, really. The first of which is to add a PID system, which will work with altitude, and then add a load of small thrusters around the craft. And although I don't want that to be the main way this thing's flying, although it is really stable already, it could be a nice backup. But I don't really want to do that. We've already added more PID than I really wanted to, and this thing is way more stable than I expected. It still rocks around a bit, unlike a pure PID craft, but it is really, really stable. The second option is to add a second blade, maybe a little bit higher, somewhere like there, so at least there's two blade sections, so you need to destroy both for this thing to sink. I think it is way too easy currently to simply knock out of the air. I think one of those two options do need to be done, although they don't need to be done, because that makes complete sense. Well, other than that, the only thing I've really done now is I've added some more armor to the inside. I've armored up the AI section more. That's why it took so long to finally knock out and completely kill. And I am very, very happy. Let's have one last fight against something, maybe the Sentinel. Those missiles really are quite agile. Oh, that was such a close call. The turret is doing better than it used to, as you can see, constantly chunking off pieces of armor. And its movement is just about erratic enough that Cram is having a tough time hitting it. I say as it gets hit. Well, it survived. Wow, it really survived. Oh, I didn't let it reload, did I? Well, I'm a dum-dum. Missiles! I think maybe I'm letting it get a bit too close to the enemy, although this would be great for capturing, and it can still fire directly underneath it. And it is making it hard for the enemy to shoot. Actually, yeah, it's got into such a position that the enemy can't fight back. Okay, well, it beat the Sentinel, and that's quite heavily armoured craft, so I'm happy enough with that. Still not 100% with the turret, though. I think I need some more work. Oh, yep, it definitely does. For instance, rebuilding it after it gets destroyed. What? Well, that was a weird shell. A little while later, and yep, there we go, AI dead. That the weapon is half back online. It doesn't really have all of its barrels, but it did reload its mantlet, so it could still fire. So what I'll say is right now, I think this is going to be a good general purpose craft. It won't be affected by terrain, obviously, since it's a flyer, but most importantly, I think it's going to be okay against most enemies, but definitely focusing on enemy flyers and very small ground units. We haven't really seen all that many of them recently, but it is nice to have this in the fleet, and that way we could perhaps replace the Scorpion with this craft. In fact, I think this would be better than the Scorpion in a lot of situations, since the Scorpion's firepower is so weak against armor, and although this one is as well, not quite as much. Since my back's killing me and we're definitely out of time now, I think we should leave it here. Overall, the craft is definitely in a position where it can be functional in a battlefield and is actually quite powerful, but I think there are two major things I desperately need to do. First of all is add some kind of backup ability to fly, because right now, that lovely rotor blade in the center is just too vulnerable. It's going to end up on the ground in almost every battle, except for against enemies which maybe use more blunt force attacks, so very high explosive shots, which will be protected against. But anything with armor penetration or hesh or something like that will destroy the rotor blades incredibly quickly. I also think I need to armor up these sides a bit more, once again, to simply protect the rotor blades. The second thing I need to do is actually pretty much that, just more armor in general. The AI is a little bit more exposed than I would like, and the same goes for the engine, so I think adding a couple of layers of armor after adding the altitude changes would be very, very beneficial, and honestly not that expensive since the areas aren't particularly large. Once those two things are done, this is going to be a very difficult craft to fight against. So, any name suggestions, please leave in the comments, and with that, thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, then of course, likes, favourites, shares, comments, all that good stuff, helps out me, helps out the channel, and most importantly, shows that From the Depths is a series you wish to see continued in the future. In the next episode, we'll quickly finish this thing off, make it look a bit more rustic, and then get back into the campaign. I'm sure the Twin Guard are very happy to see their long-lost friend.